Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about how to sing like Mr. Scott Weiland, of course, of Stone Temple Pilots. Now this should have been an accompanying video back when we looked at the top 5 live performances when I did that video, and I never got around to this, so we're going to do it today. So Scott Weiland has a pretty unique voice and pretty interesting ideas when it comes to vocal melody and those kind of things. Now, he is not necessarily known as an incredibly impressive singer because his range is a little bit limited, and he, does not do big, powerful belting things like you might see from other singers, but he's very unique. He's very good at tone manipulation and vowel manipulation. And of course, like I said, he writes very unique melodies that end up being very appealing. But first, let's get into the basic techniques of why he sounds like the way he does. Vocal compression is always the first place to start. So remember, pushing with your abdominals, especially your lower ones, as you're singing. That will compress the air, give you a little bit more sustained sound, and it will also bring out a little grit depending on how much compression you use. If you're using a lot, there's going to be more. If you're not using as much, there's going to be less. Scott kind of has a medium amount of compression, which doesn't give you super heavy grit, but it does give you just that slight airy edge that you hear on really good singers. Let's start with something basic. Let's look at Plush real quick. And this is what it would sound like if you didn't compress your voice. It would be kind of lame. And I feel the time's a ways to go. So where you going till tomorrow? And I see that these are lies to come. So would you even care? Not a lot of compression there. It sounds kind of lame, but when Scott does it and adds a little bit of compression, we get this. And I feel that time's a ways to go. So where you going till tomorrow? And I see that these are lies to come. So would you even care? So we get a little bit more life there. You hear that little bit of compression. It's not super heavy. Now, when he gets higher in his range, you're going to notice it more. So if we went to the next part, and I feel it, and I feel it, yeah. So there's a little bit more there, a little bit more of that compressed edge, so it sounds just a little bit grittier. And that's the basics there with his voice. The next thing that he does is manipulating his mouth a lot while he's singing. When he's going through his vowels, he's very much singing through them, He's not being very static because his mouth is going to be very open. So like that ending line, so would you even care? It's like, so would you even care? So it's a lot of constant movement with your lips to kind of move the tone around and sing through those vowels, which is in contrast to some other singers. People have compared him with his early stuff of being kind of like Eddie Vedder or Scott Stapp, but he's really not, because he's way more open with his vowels usually. He doesn't use, that kind of darkening sound as much. He does do it a little bit, which we will talk about in a second, but it's not to the same effect that those other guys might. Because like when we go to the chorus here, his mouth is going crazy, and it's like, oh, where you going for tomorrow? Oh, where you going when the mask are found? And I feel when the dogs begin to smell her. Will she smell alone? So there's way more of that, moving his tone around and moving his mouth a lot. So next thing, we talk about the darkening thing that we said before. Let's go to a song that actually uses that a lot more as an example. So we go to Dead and Bloated, one of the heavier songs on Core, and his voice reflects that sound. So he's going to have a little bit of a darker sound, very strong compression. And let's get into why this is a little bit different from what you might be doing on Plush. I'm smelling like a rose that somebody gave me on my birthday deathbed. I am smelling like a rose that somebody gave me, 'cause I'm dead and bloated. So it's a lot more compressed, a lot more chest voice. Now let's talk about the darkening more. When we get to the next part of the chorus, you can really hear this kind of kind of sound very subtly. Oh, yeah, and she says it's natural. I feel I've come of age. When she peeks, I start to run. Oh, yeah, and she says it's natural. I feel I've come of age. When she peeks, I start to run. So you can hear it on peaks. Peaks, kind of like that. That's a little bit of exaggeration. I start to run. So you can hear that kind of sound a little bit more on that kind of song. But again, see, it's not overwhelming. He's using it very subtly. It's not like the other guys that we mentioned who use it a lot and it's super noticeable. This just gives him a slight difference in tone that makes a heavier song like this sound a little bit better in context. Throwing this extra clip in here because I forgot to address something else with Scott's voice back in the Core and Purple days. On some songs he would take this interesting posture where he kind of has a little bit of a southern drawl or like a, old school southern gentleman kind of voice where he kind of sounds like this a little bit, you know what I'm saying? A little bit like Foghorn Leghorn, if you know what I mean. So, and when you take that kind of sound and then you apply a lot of compression to it and really sing it and go up higher in your range, you get something that sounds a little bit like this. So let's take a quick little excerpt here from Where the River Goes and you'll see what I mean from that. I wanna be as big as a mountain. I wanna fly as high as the sun. I wanna know what there is like in heaven. I wanna know where the river goes. Let's think about that in a different context of how you would say it if you were talking. It'd be like, I wanna be as big as a mountain. I wanna fly as high as the sun. So you can kind of hear this a little bit. You see, I say thing there in the back there. And of course, like we demonstrated there, you apply that to vocals, you get that kind of sound from Scott. There's one more aspect, though, of how he uses his voice early on. And that's, of course, kind of his lower sort of whispering kind of sound. And so if we go to like the opening of Big Empty, for example, he starts out with compression, yes, but it's very low. It's very quiet, sort of like talking quietly, just a little bit, You don't want to be too loud. And then you take that kind of sound and you put a lot of compression onto it. It makes this airy kind of sound, but it's in a different way, how you typically would do this, because it doesn't make it gritty. It makes it airy instead. So it's not driving faster in my car. It's not like you're doing something like that. It's more whispery, like this, for example. Driving faster in my car, falling farther from just what we are. Smoke a cigarette and lie some more. These conversations kill. Falling faster in my car. So there's that kind of thing happening there. You don't want to go too hard there. You want to be very careful. Keep that low in your voice. Keep it very quiet. Don't get too crazy. It's very easy to sit in this position once you get the compression where you need it to be. So, you're not going to use too much air. You're not going to get too tired doing that. It's a pretty simple well, it's not a simple technique, but it's one that's not super taxing, and you can practice it a lot without doing any kind of damage or hurting yourself. And it's a really fun and interesting kind of texture to work on. And then, of course, once he gets to the chorus, it's more of his typical kind of sound, more like, to execute plush with a more medium kind of compression, and depending on how he moves his mouth, makes it sound more or less gritty. So that's a pretty simple thing there. Let's talk about his big tonal change when we get to Tiny Music. We're going to talk about that real quick. with Tripping on a Hole in a Paper Heart. Now, when they go to this album, he does some things a little bit different with his voice. He starts using his nasality a lot more instead of relying more on that sort of strong mixed, chesty kind of mixed sound that he would have done on the first two records, especially on Core. He's going to rely more on things that are happening in his nose and up in the mask, which is, of course, this area from above your lip around your nose here and your nose itself, kind of that area. And so you want to be up in here like this, that kind of sound. But of course, he starts off with this kind of lower, more resonant kind of sound here. So he starts playing with his resonance a lot more, playing with the lower register and then going up to a more nasal kind of register, which is a really interesting contrast with this song in particular. So if we look at the verse first, let's talk about don't cut out my paper heart, I ain't dying anyway. Take a look at Eiffel Towers, never trust them dirty liars. Sipping lemon yellow booze, oh let Belly sings the blues. All dressed up on wedding day, keep on tripping anyway. There's a little bit of this kind of resonant sound there, which is keeping his voice forward. It's a tiny bit nasal in the resonance, but you're getting more of that lower resonance when you're doing. So don't cut out my paper heart, that kind of sound. But then when we get to the chorus, of course, of this song, it's way different, and he's going to be super nasally. For example, if we look at the chorus of Tripping on a Hole in a Paper Heart. I said I'm not myself, I'm not dead, and I'm not for sale. So keep your bankroll lottery, just a deathbed monarchy. So, it's very much up in his nose like this. I said I'm not myself. That can be pretty tough to keep your voice up there and do the compression at the same time. You can keep practicing it. If you just practice that first line, that's really great for getting this type of texture of his voice right. I said I'm not myself, I'm not dead, and I'm not for sale. So you can get a little bit sibilant. Your S's can get a little weird doing that a lot, but again, practice it a lot. You can start to work out those little subtleties there and make it sound a little bit better. We're getting near the end of this explanation here. So we've covered a lot of things so far. We've covered his compression, how he does that, how he darkens his sound a little bit, how he changes how heavy his compression is, and then of course changing the texture of it to whisper, things like that, or go really nasally with his compression here, like we did up higher in his range. And then he starts later, of course, exploring his tone differences a lot more, not using that compression or that standard kind of rock sound as much, going to a little bit different kind of sound that's really, centered around the emotion and delivery of the song rather than this kind of just balls to the wall, send it kind of mentality. So if we go to a song like Black Again, which is on Shangri-La-Di-Da, he kind of goes on this weird kind of Beatles kick kind of sound with. So if we go to Shangri-La-Di-Da here, he kind of goes with a Beatles kick on this album, and his melodies and his delivery sounds very Beatles-ish, for lack of a better term, Not totally Beatles, but you can tell it's definitely inspiring some of his things here. But this song Black Again is very, emotional. It's got a very specific feel. It's very unlike things he's done before because it's not aggressive in any way. Kind of goes like this, if my memory's right about the melody here. When you're fed up and lonely and nothing else seems to matter really, I'll be waiting here for the black cloud to leave you. I'll be here to hold your hand when you're tired and lonely. She can't eat, she can't sleep, she's not well. She can't breathe, she's in bed, she's in hell. So you can tell how emotional this song is. When it's in the verse there, and it starts with that lower part, jumps up to the high, and then comes back down to the low. We can do that again so you can really hear this. When you're fed up and lonely. So it jumps up there. And nothing else seems to matter Oh, really? I'll be waiting here for the black cloud to leave you. I'll be here to hold your hand when you're tired and lonely. So that's a very beautiful melodic part there, but you can see how it's much more relying on the emotion of this song. And you got to be really careful with it. Don't over compress it. Don't get too aggressive, or you're going to miss the point and the whole vibe of this song if you do that. And this kind of era of Stone Temple Pilots, be really careful with that. So anyway, I think we've covered the main bases here. The things we've talked about are very specific, overarching things that he does or has done with his singing. And if you hit those things, we talk about the compression, medium compression, heavier compression, depending on the context of the song. All this constant vowel manipulation and lip manipulation to mess with the tone and make interesting differences in the way different words are delivered. We talk about kind of this more whispering kind of sound he goes for, talk about a more resonant kind of sound, that relies more on the resonance of his mouth rather than being super compressed or anything like that, using his compression higher up in his range in a very nasal fashion. And then, of course, we talk about here this more laid back approach that, again, is using resonance and focusing a lot on an emotional delivery of a lyric. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of Scott Weiland's techniques and what he does to sound his own unique way that only he can. Of course, you're not going to sound exactly like him from this because no two people ever sound alike singing, but get these techniques down and you can definitely master his style. And with that, like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a comment down below. And as always, don't forget to click the bell so you know when a new video is out. And I'll see you guys next time in another video. Have a good one.